Morning, everyone. Great to see you all in rainy Vilnius. So just to entertain you a little bit this morning, I was asked to talk a little bit about a very fuzzy topic called the digital transformation. Very abstract, but I think I will give some body to this substance. And kind of a major message is that you can't really, at any level, personal, professional, nowadays ignore technology. I will try to give some facts that hopefully will convince you to spend a little bit more time at least researching what it is and applying it to your daily work and life. So the good news is technology is becoming simpler. With every single day, it becomes simpler and simpler to the extent anybody can use it now. Again, I hope I'll share some of the latest trends and latest data that you can actually use in your real life, because I hate being too abstract, so I do promise I will give you some practical advice as well. And we have approximately 1 hour, so I'm planning to skim through presentation maybe 30-40 minutes. Please, if you want to comment or ask or clarify something, just raise your hand. It's like a tiny audience. I can definitely see everybody. So I'll finish my sentence and we can discuss what's important for you. We will still have like 10, maybe 15 minutes at the end of the presentation, just in case you really want to talk about something where it's professional, applicable to your work, or to anything you want to talk about this morning. So, as often, I start from far, far away. Don't be surprised, this is not going to be economic presentation, although nowadays, given what finances are doing, it might make sense, but still it's not. And it starts 2,000 years ago. And I do often use this slide to illustrate the pace, the acceleration, how the humankind is developing primarily technology, knowledge, to just live better for the humankind. So this is the graph, they call it the GDP per capita, a very political / economical term, but basically it represents how much wealth and how much good the humankind does per capita, so for each person. As you can see, it's been almost flat for the whole 2,000 years, except the last tiny short period. So we are now living at this explosion. It's actually more than exponential. And as you can probably connect the dots, extrapolate, basically we're going to infinite wealth, infinite good. It's hard to believe right now when the headlines is struggling for food, struggling for energy, etc., etc. But please do remember this is like a tiny micro context, last year, couple of years. In the global context, we're basically heading to infinity, the future where humankind doesn't have to work at all. It's at will, so if you want, you do. If you don't, the economy without any human can produce enough wealth, enough food, enough energy, enough goods for every single one. So this is where we are, clearly shown by this graph. Now, another important point, again, this is my promise, this is the last economical slide. But again, I think it does illustrate very well why, again, at any level, it's just important for every single one to actually not just observe what's happening, but participate in that. So this is a very classical graph. It's the largest ever, say, battle in humankind between capital and labor. Again, translating to just regular human words, capital represents who owns the tools and the goods and the assets and the properties, whether it's land or buildings or computers or know-hows or patents, etc. So it represents the ownership part, if you own something. Now, the other side, the labor side of the equation, is basically how you work. So it represents your working hours, literally translating or creating something or building or digging. And if you do recall a little bit the human history, it's always been a fight between who owns versus who works. From 2,000 years ago until now, it's capital versus labor, because the labor says, I deserve a piece of the good because I actually work with my hands. But the capitalist says, no, you got to share because I own the machine, the land, the building, the know-how, the technology, the company, like name it. So the important point is that until actually pretty recently, 1972, the returns, so that nice wealth growth graph, actually was distributed pretty equally. So if you see until 1972, the growth of the compensation for labor was exactly the same, plus minus like a couple percent, as the growth to returns to capital. So more or less, capital and labor was in peace, right? They said, hey, like together, like with, yes, I have ever sophisticated machines, but you need qualification, you need like ever sophisticated knowledge to work with those machines. So more or less, they split the pie equally until 1972. Since then, extremely clear, extremely unfair, I would say, trend is labor basically does not gain at all, zero, from that exponential graph. So the return on labor has been flat for the last 50 years. Little economists talk about that because that's a very uncomfortable topic to talk about. While the return on capital has increased threefold, almost like 250%. So basically, the economical take is that whatever the growth, because of the technology, because labor is constant, actually shrinking, the resources are constant. So the only cost for that growth is technology and progress, the only single one cost. So the gains somehow go to the capital side of the equation, while leaving the labor side of the equation pretty much flat. Now, that's not still the worst news. Now, the worst news is that most economists actually agree that if you scroll the time forward, then the capital gain results, returns, go to infinity, while the labor returns are going down to zero. Again, the human worst interpretation of that is, the good news is it doesn't come in next like 5 years or 10 years. We're talking about maybe like 30, 50, 100 years time frame. So there is still time to prepare and to enjoy working. But again, when I say that, I actually do mean that once things happen, actually you still can enjoy working, but it's not mandatory anymore. Anyway, so basically the current data shows and suggests that from now on, we're heading to a society where if you own a piece of something, again, in the modern societies, be it shares of Google or interesting knowledge that only exists in your head, etc. So if you own something, then the return on that is going to be infinity. While if you want to live from working, nothing that you can do actually is needed for the rest of the society. Nothing, zero, right? However creative you are, however smart you are, however strong you are, it just doesn't matter. So basically, you couldn't add anything to the economy of the future. Again, I will try to explain why this is not scary at all. As scary, totally the opposite. It's pretty exciting. But the initial reaction, like when people realize that, or at least start believing that, it's like, hey, like that's scary. Sure. That is part of the trend, yes, that's exactly part of it. So when I talk about the capital side of the equation, it's anything ownership. It's PEs, it's VCs, it's straight equity, it's obligations, anything that you own, piece of land, a house, and knowledge, etc., etc. So anything that you technically, formally own. So the return on ownership is going to be massive and infinite, actually. The return on labor, anything you do, is going to decrease, and at some point, maybe 50 years from now, maybe 100, it's basically zero. So it means whatever you do, it's like nobody needs that, right? So Harari said actually, if for the last couple thousand years, the humankind was a battle against exploitation, so I wanted the other guy to work for me, now the going forward fight is with irrelevancy. I want to be needed, like I want to do something, but nobody needs me. because I cannot add anything to it. But again, the good news is we have like 50 years, decades, for that to fully happen. But again, even now in this presentation, I will try to prove a couple of points with what's happening now, not 10 years, not 50 now. But anyway, coming back to this slide, again, economically speaking, it does make a lot of sense right now to think about the capital side of the equation if you haven't thought so yet, because again, relying only on like working is not going to bring any incremental yields from now forward. Again, it's extremely slow process. It does depend a lot profession to profession. So some professions will disappear like tomorrow. Some will still go for some while, but at least assess what's going on, where we're heading, what are the risks, what do I do now personally. That's just the right moment. And again, like probably like the purpose of my presentation is to give you enough data or information for you to at least sit down and think. Like, okay, do I really right now need to assess and evaluate what's going on in the world technology-wise, because I'm a technology advocate at this presentation. Again, this is end of economical slides. So no more boring data, but I just felt it's important to give a little bit more global context, like why it is important to look at the technology and employ the technology. So, couple of data points that happened recently, right? Again, when you talk abstractly, technology, artificial intelligence, robots, etc., it sounds way too abstract. So I picked up some of the headlines just to illustrate what has already happened. Again, here we're not talking about what's going to be in the future. It's already happened. So first news is artificial intelligence a couple years actually ago already removed the last argument why humans are still relevant, because until maybe like a couple years ago, the standard kind of explanation or the calming position was saying, hey, like computers, yeah, like, I mean, robots are stronger than human, like for the last couple hundred years, because you cannot fight a tractor. It's just not possible. And maybe 50 years ago, they said, well, yeah, okay, maybe a machine is actually smarter, so more intelligent than a computer, and the last bastion fell when Kasparov lost the chess game to the computer. So no more humankind was more intelligent. Actually, a funny story, when on the first press conference, Kasparov was asked by journalists, like, hey, like, with little sarcasm, like, how do you feel like losing to a machine, like to a piece of metal? And he was actually pretty calm and say, you know, like, actually, I feel okay-ish, because yes, I know that he won. He means like Deep Blue, the machine. But I know for sure he doesn't enjoy that at all. So, yeah, so still, the fact is flat, that there is nothing intelligent that computers can't do better than a humankind. But the last bastion was like, hey, at least we're creative. Right, so a couple years ago, 5-ish years ago, the advocates for the humankind said like, computer never going to be creative because that's way more too abstract. And at least that's for us. So let them work, let them think, but create, yeah, no, this is just us. Unfortunately. So this is the news about the first AI drone portrait. I don't know if you can see it at least a little bit. That was sold on auction for almost $500,000. As you can see, that portrait is actually okay-ish. By nowadays, that means 2 years later standards. I will show you in this presentation how much better a computer can do. Still, it's I think it's a precedent event in humankind where the computer shown that sorry guys, but I'm the more creative among us. Now, music. Again, this is a little bit continuing the topic of creativity. So this is the headline about how computer is actually building a better music than humankind. And in blind tests, when the human is given to listen like different pieces, almost 100% they choose the computer-created music. Funny enough, when they ask, like again, still in a blind test, like why do you think this music is better The standard response was it touches on feelings, it sounds so human, unlike the other piece. And again, also by the way, interesting data point. Just since we touched this point of emotions, etc. There was as you probably don't know, but European Commission already built a special commission a couple of years ago that's going to look into the dangers that AI is potentially imposing to humans. We definitely want to avoid the scenario where AI takes over the world. So yes, the framework, how do you control computers, etc., is being created as we speak. But the funny research point was that the single biggest danger that was identified is that the computers will beat the humans on emotions. Not on intelligence, not on creativity, but emotions. And the experiment kind of proving that was a super simple one. So imagine like a standard lab test, people being tested with standard focus group, and the little robot sorry. Oh, that's way too bigger than I could possibly answer right now. Right now or in the future? Well, okay, the first that comes to mind, thanks God, humans are irrational. I think that gives a lot of unexpected features to humans, and I think right now actually I appreciate that. I do come to appreciate the fact that humans are irrational, and thanks God, because if we were all like completely rational, that would be a boring world. So some randomness, but again, like even physical is going like to extremely like fundamental questions of physics, where the world is determined or chaotic. In other words, is there destiny or will, right? So that's like, again, if you want, we can discuss it a little bit after the presentation. I just want to make sure I finish the part, the formal one, but that's a fundamental question. Anyway, yeah, so the experiment was that a little robot comes to a human and says, I'm done with my work, turn me off. Scenario A, matter of fact, like just reporting. When asked, a human turns off a computer 100% of times. Now, the slight modification, and the robot comes to a human, makes like an unhappy face and says, well, my tasks are finished, and you're supposed to turn me off, but I realize my memory will be gone, I kind of will be dead. Guess what? 80% of humans refuse to turn off a computer. 80%. And again, when asked, they say it's so inhuman to kill a machine. Again, the little rational piece says he's a robot. He's programmed to make this unhappy face, and nothing is different. Now the emotion says, I can't kill. Anyway, again, the good news, these topics are being explored, and again, I personally don't believe in the like technological world's end scenario, etc. But again, I'm just commenting on facts that actually, as of now, computers could be even more human than humans themselves. This is China. Actually, ironically, right now, a lot of innovation happening in the Asian side of the world, not in the West. Anyway, this is a TV reporter, and they streamed a completely AI reporter. So this human doesn't exist. You do? Awesome. Great. I have zero doubts. Again, the very fact that I'm standing here talking about innovation with you guys already does automatically imply that you care, you talk, and you think it's important. So I have zero doubts in that, and I definitely welcome it, just like trying to illustrate that the whole profession of actors, reporters, etc. disappears because nobody could tell that this is not a human. Right? Just like think of the consequences. So all the Hollywood stars, all the TV reporters, etc., technically no longer necessary. Technically, again, they could, and like probably it's fun to have like human playing, but anyway, they are not technically necessary. Again, doesn't mean we should remove them at all. I'm just saying that yeah, they're just not necessary. AIs are being hired into professions like law. Right? Again, typically it's considered to be sophisticated, requiring a lot of training, etc. Again, ironically, probably legal is one of the first domains that will surrender, specifically because that's one of the most structured areas in humankind. Actually, a side comment, whenever I talk to people, A, can actually tell at the by 10th minute that it's a lawyer talking. B, actually, I do enjoy talking to lawyers because this is a rare profession. We are trained to actually clearly express what we want. Right? Again, it's not bad, it's not good. It's just I like that way because I hate talking about hey, how's weather? Oh, yeah, you're right. The war is coming. That's not what I ask, etc. But lawyers actually have been trained years of probably university, maybe years of practice to express a little bit more clearly than the rest of us. It's the knowledge itself is pretty structured. So technical, again, in ideal world, you have precedents, you have formal law, etc., etc. So it's a little bit more rational than the rest. So as of such, it's a little bit easier for AIs to grasp because they grasp logic first. Actually, funny cases, one of the cases reported when they hired. So one of the super simple tasks that specific AI was asked to do is just look at the employer's employment contract and say, hey, does it look okay relative to the rest of legislation? Funny enough, the conclusion was your constitution contradicts itself. So the computer take is, hey guys, we've written so many laws. First, don't check against the law first, make sure they don't contradict each other because I have no clue whether I should apply to that law or that law because they're incompatible. Anyway, so movies, whole movies are being created, and yeah, the world has already seen first documentary. I have not yet heard of full-scale commercial movies yet, but documentaries have been produced, and actually, based on the professional expert reports, they've been really good. And yeah, I didn't put video here because sometimes you come across this incompatibility, etc. But I definitely highlight a company called Boston Dynamics, which is famous for producing very advanced robots. We are a series of robots, humankind and dogkind. Remarkable how they dance, how they move, how they look like. So one of the last barriers is interaction with the physical world. Is actually again being removed as we speak. So it's very fair expectation that next maybe 10 years we'll see again a physical embodying of the computer, so they can actually physically can do anything that human can do. Again, it's fun to watch them dancing, line dancing, and all this kind of stuff. But again, I definitely think there is more use to that than just entertain. So these are just some highlights. Again, there are multiple, gazillion other domains. I just picked up those, but definitely you can see that's happening across the board. So that's the intro. And now, what do you actually do to stay relevant? What are the practical advices? Again, we have little time, so I decided to opt in for a couple specific, to me, probably most valuable advices as opposed to going through everything. But let's start. So one is as simple as it can sound, just making sure that you spend time on learning what's happening and hopefully actually using that pays a lot of dividend. There is this rule, planning versus doing, exploring versus exploiting. Again, it's in the management, it's a pretty well-covered topic, so I won't go into that. The modern kind of interpretation of the rule that if you do anything like your job, your studying, your vacation planning, your home planning, retirement planning, anything, rule of thumb, spend 20% on research, 80% on actually doing that. Yeah, sounds abstract, but when I applied it to, for example, my university choice, I kind of thought, hey, I spent maybe 0.5% deciding what to study, and then the next 5 years actually doing that. So from that kind of perspective is extremely stupid. So I definitely did not do a proper research, what options available, what topic to choose, what geographics to choose. It's just hey, everybody's going to Vilnius University, it's kind of cool. So I kind of go. That's it. So my major is economics. Yeah, so that's why the economical slide. always find a way to attach that. And actually, my kind of thesis is that behind everything in our modern life is some kind of economics. Awesome. Mhm. Let's do a very simple poll. I mean, just to check, because I have like no idea what the crowd is first time, but very simple poll. So, how many of you? Well, I do kind of imply that as everybody else, you spend 5 days a week working. That's a fair assumption. Okay. So 5 days a week working. So how many of you spend per week a 1 full day on just research, nothing else? Raise your hands, please. That roughly. But you know, like, what's funny? Statistically, your table is the only table. So, okay. No. I seen a couple of random hands everywhere else, but apparently. The concentration on that table is, from that, a very important statistical take. If you do something, if the people around you do something, it doesn't mean at all that others do the same. It's called the observation bias. So you are faced with facts, and you make interpretation that based on the nearest visible facts, the rest of the world is the same. No. Again, but anyway, I think it's a consistent result with everybody else. So maybe 10%, maybe 15 of that crowd actually spends 20%, which is 1 full day on research, which is great. Again, my personal guess, completely blind test, that specific table actually professionally does better than the rest. It's my speculation. You know the result. Sure. Yes, as opposed to work.
Right, but the whole idea is, I mean, is it like Monday I'll research everything I might need to know Tuesday through Friday, or
including?
You mean like in the aggregate? You know, when you aggregate, we're all researching all the time. Maybe there's a misunderstanding on what the question is, because when something comes up and we don't know the answer, of course we research it. You know, anytime I encounter something even remotely interesting, I'll research it. You know, so I probably spend even more than that, but not like is it the whole idea like set aside, you know, Sunday to just like learn art history or something? What did you mean?
Okay, first of all, yeah, of course. I mean, in a usual lab formal test, there would be like, as you say, like 25 pages describing like what is included, what's not included in the research. So I will try to be brief. My personal definition may differ from yours. To me, research is something you research not related to a very particular need or task that you can do now. So if I have a task in the evening, present a presentation, and I pull facts for that presentation, to me, it's my work, because I have an extremely defined result what I need to do for work. Now, if I sit down and read the article, hey, like Midjourney is the newest, greatest AI for painting, I have no specific task. I say, okay, like I want to actually familiarize myself. So I go to play, generate one image, other image, no specific purpose. Just the purpose is researching itself. That's research to me. So that's kind of my definition. Again, it may formally differ a little bit from the rest of you, but I personally, maybe 30% of my time, because it's fun, because I justify myself that, yeah, I just need to know this latest gadgets, the latest tools, etc., etc. But that's my definition of research. Would your answer be the same? Okay. Okay. Oh, that's awesome. I'm happy we're like-minded. I'm super happy. Awesome. Awesome. Well, actually, again, there is a pretty deep philosophy between the formula itself is called explore versus exploit. It's been like discussed for years. Yes. Yeah. So there is a reason why it's like again, on average across sports, across people, across like, again, when we talk averages, it's very difficult because when you come to a single case, it's always a deviation. And like the rules are based for averages, while every single life case is different. So you never ever live or do anything average. It's like it's impossible to find average height person. Impossible. Every single one is either higher or lower. So yeah, so when I talk averages, I do talk averages. Again, you need to evaluate like 1,000 specific things. But again, there is a risk of spending too much time on just research. There is a risk, we call it the phenomenon of academic career. Ever heard of that phenomenon? So actually, again, economically, sorry again for that, for breaking my promise, but economically, if you correlate the studying degree, like bachelor, et cetera, on your earnings, a very funny cusp. So until PhD degree, it's a positive correlation. So the more you study, the more you earn. After PhD degree, like professor, et cetera, funny enough, your ROI diminishes. Right, so it goes down. In other words, if after PhD you still study, you have a risk of what we call falling into academic career, means doing nothing, and research papers and conferences and all this stuff, actually doing nothing in life, just papers. It's not doing nothing, sorry for comment, but not exploiting what you learned, right? So there is a fine balance point, how much time it makes sense to just allocate to learning what's new, what's cool. And actually, there is a balanced time that you need to spend actually exploiting, so extracting use of that. But again, this is we're talking about averages. Just to share, 20% sounds right to me. So if somebody doesn't spend that kind of time, I definitely would suggest at least try for a couple of weeks, see what happens. I definitely think that nowadays, that technology accelerates, and my later section will be about tools, is that new tools that can increase your productivity 1,000 times, million times appear daily in any area. So it's a pity when you learn of something that could have saved you maybe hours and hours, maybe days, maybe years, and you say, oh, I could do that? Wow, why in hell last like 10 years I was doing that the old-fashioned way? Wasted so much time, so much effort, and produced so much forced resort. And again, sure. Deep work, you mean the state of flow?
So that with this distraction that we're constantly surrounded by
Yeah.
from everything, that it prevents us from actually focusing on something.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that with one full day per week? Shut down, family, media. How do you do that? Because there is, at least in my life, constant distraction.
Okay, yeah, it's worth probably a separate seminar on how do you do time planning. Coincidentally, well, unfortunately in Lithuanian there is my presentation on time management, and it covers in depth that specific topic. Like the short answer, like my personal answer, you focus on things, one thing at a time. At a time, well, to me it's time blocks like hour length, not definitely day or week. So I never ever answer a phone. That's one of the things, because that's one of the biggest distractors. My kind of colleagues know that if in calendar I blocked some time, if you want more than 5 minutes of the time, just go and coordinate a calendar or something, even if it's like 10 minutes or something like that, because yeah, it's extremely important to guard against calls, against coming colleagues, against something else. So when you work that 1 full hour, you work that 1 full hour. So no zero distractions. It takes effort. It definitely takes constant efforts to constantly guard your time. But you're totally right. If you kind of allow, for example, phone calls, random phone calls into your life, that's it. You can't, even if somebody doesn't call, you still are kind of expecting to call all the time. So that itself is already enough to break you from the state of flow. So yes, focusing, but not like okay, now one day, that's it. No, and actually I do like time management for calendar. Not task management. Tasks is just like an endless list without any specific date or length attached to it. calendar is the opposite. Like you have tasks, but you actually budget them in your time. So I have like a rule. So in general, unless something major happens, weekends are off. So like no phones, no calls, no like zero. Again, the rest of days, anything is planned in the calendar. And if you do that, you do nothing else. So that's one tiny advice, but there is more length to it.
Can I suggest like the AI said you contradict yourself?
Sure.
At the beginning you said you admire the unpredictability in humans.
Yeah.
You're becoming predictable.
I am predictable, yeah. In some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways, yeah, sure. Well, I admire basketball stars, which unfortunately I'm not. So admiring doesn't mean at all that you are that way. And I admire people who can fly, pilots. Awesome, I admire them. I wish I was pilot. Actually, was a real choice at some point in my career, but unfortunately, when evaluating, so I'm not. So, like to me, yeah, admiring not necessarily means you are that. Sure.
Sorry, real quick, you said 1 full day per week. In your experience, when would be a good time to put a block of just research? Monday morning, or just from what you do? Because obviously you practice what you preach. Do you do a Friday morning a block for research, or is it better at the beginning of the week, or the middle of the week, or in the afternoon?
So that specific one, I don't have a specific day or structure because apparently too many things happen. Like that specific Thursday I'm here means if I had planned something for Thursday, that would be like not matching. But again, one day it's a small piece enough to be flexible. So to me, like I have like 3 passes to my calendar typically. One is like long ago, next week's like is a week ago, next week is like a day. So always you find like little tiny blocks between meetings and stuff, because again, keeping like 6 months ahead fully blocked calendar is not efficient at all because you can't fit things. Totally the opposite, like not planning is also not good at all. So I kind of gravitated towards like 3 passes, and eventually feeling, even when the day is ahead, like probably 80% of the day is filled. Again, coincidentally, the engine mechanics say the optimal engine load is 80%. Because if you load anything 100%, it breaks down, and you can't fit anything, etc. So it's optimal. So I kind of do the same to my time. So any single day, like when I wake up in the morning, kind of 80% filled. And then again, I have like no idea if I read the news and then something super exciting happens, I would do it right now, right? So it's about pace, that specific as opposed to planning. But ultimately, when you look backwards and say, hey, like if I literally like calculate the hours, more or less, it's more like actually third. Because I still do coding. I love coding for many ways, including the state of law, which it gives me. So I spend maybe a day, maybe a full hour personally coding. I'm not good enough to actually show the world what I code, but it's good for me to stay informed. Because unless you actually physically do something, you can't fully understand that. Just can't. Because journalists is like they not necessarily understand what we write, etc. So unless you touch it physically and then interact with APIs, with engines, with code, etc., you can't really understand what's going on. Again, my day job is investing. Part of that day job is investing in startups, and when startup comes in and explains something, actually there is 10% chance he knows himself what he's talking. But to tell that 10%, you actually have to be doing that yourself. That's kind of my philosophy. So yeah, it's more like ad hoc. Ultimately, yeah, around third of my time. Sure.
Yeah, just one little comment. I like what you said, that it's there in the moment, and I think that's the answer to everything. You can set your intention, and then you can just give it to flow. I mean, you know what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and then in the moment you decide what's up to you now, and then you really get the answer, and it's inside of you.
You know, I have a feeling that
Planning. I mean, you know what you want to do, but if it's research right now, you go with research. I mean, if it's 20%, you set the intention of 20% in your time, whenever it is, month or week, and you go and work with your own flow, it'll come up with very effective.
it's about pacing as opposed to planning. It's priorities as opposed to fixed tasks. So yeah, through pacing and priority, you can still achieve the same result as planning. So anyway, but I do have a feeling that after the presentation, you have, as I understand, like a day of networking, a great dinner, etc. So I already see a lot of interesting conversation coming among us. So it's great to see that. But anyway, coming back, because I still want to finish the presentation. There are not many slides. but I definitely want to cover what I cover just to give you enough seeds. So again, to be a little bit more practical, what it means research, it definitely starts with just reading the news. Again, my personal habit, again, doesn't mean at all it's right, correct, suitable, etc. I skip all the major news sources like CNN, local, I just don't read them. Of course, major highlights hit you anyway, but I don't have a habit sometimes like talking and realizing you have like no clue who's your PM in your country. It's a little bit awkward and a little bit maybe bad, but yeah, I focus on my kind of set of news that I define for myself. So I realize that there are specific tech blogs, there are specific tech sites. It's super easy to like Google like tech news, top 20 results, see what you like, use it, and at some time you identify specifically your sources. But just like making it a habit to filter what's specific to you, and just like making a habit before like night sleep, you just scroll what happened in like your specific news sources space. So I do like Google News myself because I think it does fairly good job of selecting, like predicting what I may like. So like gravitating to general Google News with AI suggestions as opposed to like specific set of like CNN or BBC or something. I mean, worked for me. Again, like it's not an advice, it's just like sharing what I do. But definitely it starts with just following the news regularly on a daily basis, like what's going on in your space. Because if something major happens, definitely it's going to hit. And the earlier you learn, the better for you. Because sometimes between, hey, like it came up, and everybody's using that, sometimes it's days. So if you like late for even a week, sometimes even a week way too late. But anyway, so that's my kind of professional habit. Second is what I do observe, the good news, is that as opposed to innovation and definitely exploitation of technologies happening in hidden labs, the process is the opposite. So whether it's like Google or Facebook or anybody producing something major, they tend to build open tools and enable access to anyone. In most cases, actually free of charge. So many of you have heard quantum computing. It definitely is like next age. It's a separate topic. IBM is one of the like first producers of quantum computers. So actually, couple years ago, they enabled anyone on the planet through online accessing their quantum computer and coding. So I registered, got an invite like the next day. Yes, I was given an environment. Yes, you queue their jobs because everybody wants to test like what it's like. But the point I'm trying to make is the further we go, the more accessible. Even the latest and the greatest, most sophisticated technology becomes to every single one individuals. Not like corporations, not companies, not like a massive charge, like early computers say would charge you like 50 grand for 1 hour of computing time, something like that. Nothing like that's happening. So all the most sophisticated, all the greatest technologies, APIs, tools, etc., tend to just be freely put online, and it could be used by anyone. And you would be surprised, but if you start first, when you want to do something, think what kind of machines could help me? Where is translation, creativity, presentation, logo for my new business, whatever, you will be surprised that there are now tools just about anybody and anything on the planet. The ones that I'm using, for example, if you like struggling to create a business name, button, suggestions, you say, hey, like I would never ever came up with like such great ideas. You want a business logo, button, you have like hundreds of logos in no time, and most of them are much better than designers try to sell you after weeks of asking like how you want to be, etc., etc. You want translation? There. You want legal analysis? There. You want abstract of the new long article that you don't like to read? There. So on and so on. So the couple of latest tools, one I will disclose later presentation, but one I started to use a couple of weeks ago, it's called the Microsoft Copilot. It's designed for programmers, for coders. It's AI. Actually, it's supposed to, when you code, to understand what you code and going ahead complete the code for you. extremely powerful concept because earlier we acquired a community called GitHub. That's the largest source of code repository on the planet. So like 99% of ever written code is there. So AI analyzed like they say 100 billion lines of code. And based on that, they claim they can predict what you're trying to write. And I was just like shocked how precise it was. So you start coding, it completes. So right now, maybe 2/3 of your code actually AI, 2/3. So you start writing, it's just like, and the most striking part was that I did some like kind of teasing and testing. So like I say, hey, like how does he know, like, or it, or whatever you call it, she, like, whatever, the computer knows what I'm trying to do. So variable names, okay, I hide variable names. So instead of like fund results, the variable name is like A. Still, some like 2/3 I could understand based on what it's able to predict. Like 1/3 I have no clue. It actually does predict correctly, exactly senses what I'm trying to do, but I have like no clue how, like no clue. So yeah, so it's pretty powerful, but just sharing that all those tools appear for every single need. And if you just bother to do a little bit of research, you are highly likely to find tool. And tools can actually save you gazillion amount of times, gazillion. So I'll disclose the second tool a little slightly later. But yeah, productivity increases massively. The key message is just about anything. It's not hidden in the labs, available to every single one individual. Best thing is, in most cases, it's actually free. You don't need to pay money. In the rest of the case, usually it's tiny charge. Like we're talking about like dollars or tens of dollars, not like even thousands. So learn. So when you, that's my kind of usual cycle. So when you scan news, you identify something cool that just like looks great to you. Again, usually by the time the article appears, we already like community tools, beta version, something actually that you can touch. So you go and just play with it, just to do some funny stuff or some fun stuff or something for your potential work, etc. And actually, once you've done that, like touched physically, whatever the innovation is, then you say, okay, cool, now I kind of understand what it is. At that moment, you planted the seed, and by the time you actually come in your professional life or personal life across a similar need, it ticks. You just, oh, cool. Actually, this is something I saw and touched like maybe 6 months ago, and now I can do that. So this is kind of like the learn, touch, use cycle that I personally employ. Again, there could be multiple ways of doing that, but to me it works great. Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, these are kind of just a couple of domains that I thought might be relevant to you, your specific profession. Again, I'm sure that table probably knows half of them. Let's call it advanced table. But yeah, I do use regularly text abstraction and summarization. I find it awesome. So when you need to read article like that, in most cases, 90% of any text is white noise, like completely useless. So I'm stunned how precise robots can just shrink it to like 3 sentences. You can do vectors, say, hey, like this is the text, I want like a financial projection of whatever the political text is, tell me. So squeezes like in 5 sentences, and I'm like constantly surprised how precise, how concise, how clear, how smart those summarizations are. Even to the extent that I started to read summaries of books, not fiction, because that's a separate story, but when it's something practical, again, professional, practical, etc., as opposed to book. In a typical book, if you find, that's my personal test, 5 to 10 new ideas, that's great, that's worth spending 10 hours on. The problem is like 10 sentences that could have fit, as opposed to reading 10 hours. So again, my take that majority of books is also about white noise. So summarization is awesome. I like for articles, research papers, textbooks, etc. Translation NLP tools, again, like measuring sentiment of the sentences, that's quite handy. So I have like a little robot which just scans the news, does financial projection and summary, scans the sentiment and say, hey, like today morning, in general, the world is in panic. Oh, or totally opposite. It's greedy and ecstatic. So as opposed to like scanning all that stuff, you get a sentiment. So it's remarkable how, again, how NLP tools can just like take a text, summarize what's important, give you a sentiment. That helps. Creativity tools use them almost daily, actually daily. Creativity means on any dimension. You need graphics, you need logos, you need ideas, you need articles, and so on and so on. So creativity is awesome. Robot process automation called the RPA. So basically with little helpers, because the majority of software like Outlooks and Word documents and presentations have not initially been created for automatic use. So most of them have human interfaces with mouse and menus and all this stuff, as opposed to APIs, which are computer interfaces. So RPAs have to bridge. So there's a robot who understands what's happening on your screen, website, again, electronic mail, etc. High level, you command, say, hey, extract new email messages from that screen. So super high level. We actually translate that, extract the text, which you can use in a computer way. So we call RPAs. Actually, these tools, unfortunately, are pretty expensive because there are not many providers. I personally use UiPath, but it's pretty expensive for like a personal individual use. But all of them have free trials. So if you discover it saves you a ton of time, it does make sense to invest. Actually, in most cases, professional cases, it does make sense to invest. But again, this is one of the areas which I expect to come, because you look at the Google tasks and all this kind of stuff improving and evolving. So at some point, it will be like high level. You can ask like, hey, like open my computer, do my daily email routine based on what I've done in the past, and all this kind of stuff. So it's coming. For now, it's a little bit less friendly as that, but definitely worth playing. Again, even if you have zero idea what's coding, what's programming, what's that. Again, synthetic, news articles, books. Synthetic means it's not you squeezing and doing something else, but it's done for you. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there will be two parts to your answer. Two parts. One is now, and one is I do promise to touch on the rest of my presentation, because I definitely want to answer your question, which is great and cool, but I also do want to finish in last like 7 minutes the presentation, which is not much coming. But the first part is, you are totally right, but the analogy I will use here is like friendship, human friendship, or human trust. That you typically employ in a similar way when you have like new employee or new friend. You don't say, hey, like, you're my new friend, you're supposed to be great, so here's keys from my rest of my life. No, that doesn't happen. You do little by little. So when you ask a new employee to do something, first you shadow follow them and make sure that actually what they do is in line what you would have done. So exactly the same. So I don't rely immediately. So I throw an article, have a summary, read myself the article, and decide myself how much I can rely. So would have I squeezed it in the same way or not? Yes, 8 out of 10, the answer is not. I could not rely on that specific instrument because, and then not the right accent, not the right vector, dimension, etc., etc. 20%, you get a little bit curious. Oh, cool. Yeah, actually, I would have done the same. Next time, next time, next time. If you get consistent results from the tool, which you agree, then you can drop the shadow watching and start relying a little bit more. Again, it's not different from what you do with humans. Not at all. The second part, I promise, where is my part of the human in tools? I will see a little bit in the rest of the presentation. Again, last thesis, number 3, last thesis, is if you think of that, most of what you do in your life actually has been done by somebody somewhere. So it's a fair assumption that in like general life, we all are followers. We wear these suits because somebody invented them, etc., etc. Now, the big paradigm shift is that if you're coming to a world where anything invented needs to be reinvented only once, because if somebody invented something, assumption is the rest of the world is using that. Means you fall into binary, extremely binary position where you are the inventor and you enjoy all the benefits, or reinventing doesn't make sense. I know it's a different concept to grasp because actually inventing, doing things in a different way at any level, again, like personal, professional, etc. It's called the inventive process. Like you are the first, not reading, not like copying when somebody done, but actually you say, hey, like today morning I learned this tool. I know there is a challenge professionally. I never ever heard anybody doing that, but let me try. That kind of attitude, that kind of process actually pays a ton of return. So consistently trying to invent means put together things in a new, never ever heard way, because the world, again, we're talking about like 50 years, will be ownership by inventors and everybody else. So reinventing is not happening at all because there's no need to reinvent the bike twice. So creators, inventors will be the kings. Anybody hired will be in an extremely weak position because the need for hiring or even asking anybody to do anything will probably diminish. That's kind of long-term trend, but invention is a skill which could be trained. The more you do, the easier it comes. It's not like I'm born or not born. It's like training in the gym. And B, that's probably the only skill that you will ever need going forward because, again, irrelevance is real. And again, assuming responsibility for you personally more and more, as opposed to relying to my employee, to my like family, to my like husband, father, etc., etc. That's in general a good attitude, but it's becoming more relevant because again, the good news is technology will give you everything. The bad news, you are the one to ask for that everything. Unless you ask, nobody will care, nobody will give you, nobody will bother. So unfortunately, you have to train yourself to be able to ask. Now, I have to give credit for all visuals in that presentation, unfortunately, to AI. So all the pictures you saw in the presentation, like yesterday, actually, I first time, because it's still in beta, they call it Midjourney AI, awesome, cool. It's remarkable. I decided forever that no longer, starting yesterday, I need a designer help on my presentation. I do perfectly with AI. So all those pictures that you see, I think they're cool. They're unique, not copy, not remastering, completely from scratch, created by AI. Moreovers, I just wanted to give you a couple of like awesome pictures. So when you ask AI to draw a tree, you kind of can understand how it's happening because it's clear. When you AI something about something abstract, like future, I'm just like stunned. So this is the AI created vision of the abstract keyword called future. I have no idea. This is what AI thinks term future could be visualized. Again, this is not remastering, this is not copy. Second copy of that picture doesn't exist anywhere yet, so it's completely from scratch. That's AI vision of the future. That's the rest of the presentation actually is missing. Oh, that's weird. Can I? Not coincidentally, but it's like 11 sharp when I was supposed to finish the presentation. Again, this has not been planned. I just wanted to show a couple more pictures because again, I'm like literally stunned. But again, asking for you. The other thing is, if you observed, these pictures are consistent. Yes, we are all different. Yes, in the colors, in shapes and forms, etc. So that's a little what you ask, a little of me. So for that specific presentation, I decided the colors. So I decided, hey, like vintage colors for future look kind of cool. First, vintage is kind of in design is again in fashion in general. Second is vintage versus future, kind of to me is like kind of like a cool contrast. So I decided that I want a vintage topic. I decided I want them to be in an abstract way, not a photo like quality, not like completely just shapes and forms and colors, so something in the middle. So yes, I put a little bit. Again, the interface was, this is the part of the screen for presentation. This is, that specific AI is a chatbot on Discord channel. So actually you physically chat with it. So you say, hey, like I want a topic on, how do you see, so for that specific slide, again, it's not weird. Huh, presentation is actually missing. Yeah, so for that specific slide, I asked him, like, how do you see relevancy? This is what he produced. For that specific slide is I said, like, abstract tools, because we're talking about tools. He decided these are tools, and so on. So yeah, there is still that specific slide, if you can like probably see it's like a little bit of revolution, etc. So that was supposed, again, it disappeared for now, but it was supposed to illustrate capital versus labor. You can see that, right? Yeah, so I just like say, hey, like I'm producing economic slide, capital versus labor, like what do you think about that? He produced me that, I said, cool, yeah, I can see that. So yeah, this is still a little human part, but all the routine work actually has been carried off, again, like first time without any professional designer at all. So this is how it works. Again, I do feel that we covered a lot of questions during the presentation. I do feel sorry that I have to go. If there's last question, I definitely will answer. But otherwise, I definitely had a pleasure. So thank you. But you had one question. Okay, let's.
Where do we find all these tools?
Yeah, okay, so Google Midjourney. And you will find sources in the first result page. Midjourney, one word.
Midjourney.
Yeah. It's like the best image generation tool as we speak. Like 2 weeks ago, it was eVolley by Google. So this is how fast it changes. So 2 weeks ago, I would have advised a different one. Yeah. Okay, so you had a question.
There is also a question. What do you think, what is the future of translation industry?
You know, if you do forgive me, I hate surface answers. Hate. Because, and I did not dig into that specific to answer you better than you could possibly yourself. So if you do forgive me, I hate talking about what I don't know. So it's for you to invent. Well, there's one last and let's go.
The very, very last.
Sure.
So, I have a question to you about the do your own research part of the presentation and the spending about 20% of your time.
Sorry, one again?
I have a question about spending 20% of your time
Yeah.
doing research and investing in yourself
Yeah.
and educating yourself. So, should this percentage go up as returns on capital become larger and
No.
labor decreases in value? So,
No.
because we're all basically becoming our own little capitalists, right? We have to manage our own portfolios and so forth. So
That's a good take, but again, there is a danger of falling into academic state of mind.
yeah.
So research, but no doing. Actually, I've seen a lot of startups falling into that. So they come with a brilliant idea, and when they say, hey, like, okay, I believe I invest, 6 months later, they come with 10 brilliant ideas. They say, oh, you know, like things can change, so now we can do even cooler, even more, like I can do that. I say, well, did you execute on the first vision first? So there is a risk of falling into like all academic. So I would say for short time going forward, 2080 does make sense to me. Again, I tend a little bit more research, but again, that's probably a function of me not having to work too much for living, but 80-20 sounds about right.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question that's related to this one, which you sort of already preempted the answer to, which is
Does this percentage change based on your position? Because, for example, you're a business leader, you're responsible for living in the future, right? Spending a lot of time being informed, and maybe is that a little bit different if you're, let's take an opposite extreme. If you're a bricklayer, you know, should
Yeah.
you be spending 20% of your time?
Yeah, so
Does
this is
vary
why-
based on position?
This is exactly why I made the remark that you don't find averages in real life,
Yeah.
but you prowl and rule for averages. Again, like when journalists typically ask something like that, I say, no, it depends on individual, on profession, and actually, guess what? There are two guys, I don't want to be creative at all. One is the pilot, right? Sorry, don't invent the new way of landing. Just do it 1,000 times, 10,000 times, whatever, and next is my doctor. Like, don't reinvent the surgery when you're like cutting and say, oh, actually, I think there is a new way of cutting here. Nah, sorry. So yes, the remark is on average, yes, it's a starting point. But after that, you apply it to yourself. Say, what's my profession? What's my mission? What's my preferences? What's my feelings, etc. Gazillion things. And you could end up anywhere like from 0% to maybe 100%. Actually, if you're like a journalist, that's your job. To know what's going on, and weight of writing versus researching is maybe 90-10. So yes, but on average, again, following the bell curve, 80% of population probably will fit the 80-20 rule. So unfortunately, you have to go, guys. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ilja.